Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Slam Hub Wrestling. Myself, Supreet, and this is your AEW Dynamite, WWE Dynamite review for June 30th, 2021. So we don't have Abhishek Aneja because he's on assignment, but instead we have Ridwan for this week's review. What's up, Ridwan?
Hey Supreet, how's it going?
Doing good, man. What you think about the final, you could say, show for Daily's Place for AEW?
Oh, it was a great show. I mean, AEW has been consistently putting out great shows one after the other. And now that they're going back on the road, so there are exciting times ahead. And it was like what it was, but I mean, it was a great show altogether. That's what I felt like. I thoroughly enjoyed it. What about you?
Yeah, it was a decent show, but the main event was is made up the whole experience. And by the way,
Yes.
the ever since they came back to live shows, post Double or Nothing, the shows have once again picked up. The first three tape shows were just bleh,
Yes.
but
But yeah, the past 2 weeks they've like picked up pretty well.
so this is their, you could say, farewell for Daily's Place. I think it's about 16, 15-month streak they were continuously doing those shows. Maybe one or two occasions where they went back to, I think they were taping somewhere in Atlanta, those first pandemic shows. But
Yeah, the first few weeks.
yeah, I would say even for the pandemic shows, they were pretty good.
Uh, I wasn't actively watching AEW then, but I only picked up, I would say, around Double or Nothing last year. So since then, like I've been watching quite consistently, and of course, like without crowds, or even if AEW had their own talent act as crowds, it was still. I mean, the magic was very you could say missing, and it still is to this day. Like now, like until the crowds were at their full optimum, since I think Blood and Guts,
Mm,
they had 50% crowd or 100% crowd since Blood and Guts.
I think they started getting crowds around maybe during that same time when Brody won the TNT championship, or was it after that? I don't
Oh
know.
yes.
Same,
Oh yes. My
same.
bad. Like they had like 10-15%. It kept gradually increasing by every quarter. But like recently, until Blood and Guts, like that's where the amount of fans amped up. And since then, I think the first time they got full crowds was the go home show for Double or Nothing, and then since then it's been the same. And now that they're hitting on the road, like they'll be hosting in different cities. So I think this entire month, like outside of Jacksonville, no, as in, sorry, yes, this entire month, are we going to have specials for AW or?
Yes. Mostly the July is all specials. Maybe one special Dynamite.
Yes, and it's being held in different cities. So I'm excited to just, them. And even I think the stage and everything is gonna look more grand wherever they go.
Yeah, we're going to get those dual screens plus those visual tunnel.
Hmm.
And so, by the way, what is your favorite moment from Dairy's Place regarding AEW?
Has to be the Brody, the Brody episode, A to Z. Like it was so thoroughly, I mean, done in tribute to John Huber, aka Brody Lee. And like, if you want to pick a singular moment, which also includes Brody Lee when he squashed Cody Rhodes for the championship.
Anything Brody related is now special.
Yes, absolutely.
But the other, you could say, great moment was Sting's debut, man.
Yes, like it kind of came out of nowhere because obviously there were rumors since he had like his WWE Legends contract had expired, and plus like you wouldn't expect him to pop up. And given the run that he's had since then, like it's still great to see him wrestling after how his career ended, and now here we are
And the
with his son
package,
Doug.
yeah, and the package they did for the Daily's Place, you could say, starting from, where Cody and the Elite were, announcing, from till, having some great moments, some debuts, some, championship wins, of course, Brody Lee, and at last, finally getting fans back at Double or Nothing. That was a beautiful package, I would say.
Yes, like with the inner circle just thanking them, like it was a way of AEW thanking the fans for continuously supporting the product through these tough times. And the package was really good.
And it was, you could say, no, this whole AEW running continuously at Daily's Place made Daily's Place, stand out as the, you could say, you could put Daily's Place in the list of great wrestling menus.
Yes, and obviously, like it's like the home for AEW in a way, because it's exactly like, I think it's a facility for Jacksonville Jaguars, which is also owned by Tony Khan. So it's like the home turf, similar to Full Sail is, or the Capital Wrestling Center is for NXT. So it's basically like a home ground, and whenever they decide to do a special later on, they'll return to this and just hype up like a homecoming or something like that.
They are doing it in August.
Yeah, they are. Like I think one of their shows in Boston got postponed, and they're coming back to Daily's Place as a substitute venue, which is great. I mean, Tony Khan owns the place literally, so might as well just do that.
That was, you could say, a lucky point for them, that they had something like Daily's Place to run shows.
Yes, especially, I mean, for a company who's been in existence for over 2 years.
But let's talk about the overall show, man. So on the card we had the Young Bucks. So they were facing Eddie Kingston and Penta. We also had Jungle Boy versus Jack Evans. We had Brian Pillman Jr. versus Miro for the TNT Championship. And in the main event, we had MJF versus Sammy Guevara, and so much more. But before that, if you are new to Slam of Wrestling, then make sure to like, share, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. Check out our previous content, which you'll get in the description below. But let's start from the top, man. So we had actually Chris Jericho being the guest commentator for this week's Dynamite. And by the way, Jericho's really good on commentary, man. He really ups the show as a viewer.
Yes, like he's basically trying to resonate with the fans, being someone who's in the business, and of course like representing the fans who are watching the show. He was great throughout the show, a bit wild at times, with his comments, but yeah, it was a fun experience having to listen to him. And he's also been regularly commentating on Dynamite, like in the middle, around earlier this year, and sometime in November, October. So
In the
he had
pen,
been commentating in there.
yeah, it's because of the pandemic era that we got to know that Chris Jericho could be a great commentator.
Yes, and you could say in a way, like while this is the last show for now in Jacksonville, so having Jericho commentate, giving us like a fitting tribute to the venue by itself, because of the the shows that he's done on commentary, and how good he was.
Remember when he put over that guy named Pineapple Pete?
Oh yes, like that was also early pandemic era, right? Or this was before the OC feud?
This was, I think this was before the OC feud and the pandemic era just started.
Like it just feels like a distant past that it had happened.
It's been a crazy year, man. But so Jericho was on commentary, so they kicked off with what is it? Yes, the Young Bucks versus Penta and Eddie Kingston. So this was a tag team eliminator, which means if Kingston and Penta win, then they get a automatic, title shot for against the Bucks. So this is a ongoing feud, for the before Double or Nothing even started. Like they have been, slowly take the Bucks have been slowly taking off, these baby faces. Like they injured Phoenix, they injured Pac, and they are now trying to get. They also injured John Mox. I forgot, but they are trying to get rid of Eddie Kingston. But Eddie Kingston, is forming these alliances. So the final alliance was Kingston and Penta. So the match here was really fun. But let's start from the top, man. So what happened was the Bucks came out wearing mustaches. Um, we had who is it, Matt Jackson, with simple, it's a simple mustache, you could say. Nick Jackson went a little over the top, he's looking like Lemmy. uh,
No, no, he has the Hulk Hogan mustache, Nick
or,
Jackson.
or you could say, if you're into music, you could say that is a little Motorhead influence.
Motorhead was Kenny Omega. We'll get to that, with the chopped and mustache. Nick Jackson was more Hulk Hogan type with
Eh,
the like this.
Screw Hulk Hogan, Nick Jackson was looking more like American Badass Undertaker.
Oh yeah, you could say that. But I mean, it fits the Bucks' gimmick of being these ridiculous douchebags, and they have embraced what people hate them for, like as wrestlers, and they just took that like 10 times a notch with their silly, over the top, goofy dressing up and trying to be narcissist with Brandon Cutler, constantly spraying them at ringside.
But you know
So
what?
yeah.
But you know what made this funny? It's Tony Schiavone, man.
Oh yes.
He cannot even believe what the Bucks did with this whole facial cut. And at one point, he said that these two are looking like porn stars. I cried, man.
Shivani,
I literally cried.
me too. Shivani was the MVP for me throughout the show. Like he was the funniest commentator among the three, JR, Excalibur, and Tony. So Shivani was the MVP for me in this episode. Like he was on fire throughout the show.
Shivani is underrated.
Yes, he is one of my favorite commentators. Like I've watched most of WCW in retrospect, and I would say, like I've enjoyed WCW, watching WCW, and having to listen to Tony Schiavone sometimes. Again, like he's also someone who would get over the top with his rants, but as like someone calling the match, he was amazing. It still is, and I like how in AEW you have these three commentators, someone who's in the know, like Excalibur, someone who's like a legend of the past, and Tony Schiavone represents the lapsed fans who had stopped watching wrestling altogether, and now who have like recently come back, and like I can relate to that in a lot of ways. So it's always fun to listen to Schiavone, but today, I mean, this episode, he was on fire.
And the thing about Shivani is that he feels genuine. That's why we could enjoy his commentary.
Yes, like you can't really say he was away from the business for like 14 years or 15 years. It just feels natural to listen to him. And of course, like he's representing a role in terms of connecting with the disconnected fans. But yeah, like he is so natural at it. Like he himself had gone through that, which is great.
But let's talk about this match, man. The match was, a really good opener, you could say. So the Bucks were, I think they were working on Penta in the early parts, and then I think Kingston got the hot tag, but the Bucks were still trying to, you could say, do the same thing with Kingston, but Kingston fired up, and he was really doing the great job, taking out the Bucks by himself. There was also one, spot where Pentagon actually got a great near fall. I think it was Matt, but we could also hear the crowd saying that was three, that was three. So this is where you could say the match really picked up. So lot of chaos going on. So we see some, typical heel shenanigans. We see the Good Brothers coming out. We see Brandon Cutler. I think he was about to cold spray one of. I think it was Pentagon, or I think it was Kingston. I don't know.
No, it was
So
Penta.
yeah, so I think he missed that spot and he sprayed Matt Jackson instead. And the funny part here was Brandon Cutler was not stopping with the cold spray, and someone on commentary said some. There was some line that really made this whole situation make sense. I don't know what the point was, but that was that. So the cold spray to the eyes of Matt Jackson and Nick Jackson is taken out. So Pentagon hits Matt Jackson with a package pile driver. Kingston hits the backhand fist. So this is what gets the baby faces the victory here. The champs are pinned. So Kingston and Penta get a tag title shot. And I think this is the first time that any champion in AEW is pinned. So there you go.
I wouldn't. I mean, with the last part that you said, I think Jericho himself did get pinned, but that was in a tag team match. This was maybe the first time you could say someone's been pinned in their specialty, like since Bucks are tag champions and them getting it directly pinned in tag team, and it kind of affects their record in a way, their win-loss record. But yeah, overall this match was great. I mean, it was a fun opener, and like you require such matches to kickstart the show and get the crowd amped up. But yeah, I mean, Pentagon should be doing a lot more. I feel like mostly in the singles division now that Phoenix is out injured. But the story that they are going with, like Eddie Kingston, he doesn't have enough people left for him to fight with. Like, I don't know how am I phrasing that. So yeah, so like Eddie Kingston is fighting a lone battle against the Bucks and Kenny and all the tyranny, and obviously like they took out Phoenix, and for Penta, like the Bucks took out Park and Phoenix. So like these two are facing a common enemy. So like the enemy of the enemy is my friend, and obviously like Penta and Eddie have like a bit of history when Eddie tried to form a group with them in the past. So like a lot of stories adding up, which is good. And this match was great. Like I was a bit miffed because AW doesn't really it really protects its champions and that. But this was interesting. Like the story was about Penta and Eddie not being a tag team by themselves, and how the Bucks were deriding them even to last week. Like they themselves were saying like, we are EVPs, we just threw together a tag team just because we felt it right. But they are eating their words as of that, and like in the end it got a bit overbooked for my taste. But again, like it was fine with me because they got to the finish with the story that they were saying. And shout out to Frankie Kazarian, by the way, like the elite hunter, as Excalibur keeps likes to keep screaming whenever he appears. So this is a match that is going to happen again next week for the championship at Road Rager, and I'm excited for this match. What about you?
Yeah, man, the thing about here, what happened, I think the Bucks, sorry, I'm saying Bucks, Penta and Kingston had to take the win because though those tag team combination were continuously, losing against the Elite or the Bucks. So they had to get at least one victory.
Yes, and maybe if like you would get to see how if Park and Phoenix return sometime down the line, how are they going to play that story into this? If if by any chance if they win next week, I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but we'll see. Like only time will tell. Like AEW keeps surprising us in many ways.
And about protecting their champions, it had to happen one day that the champions had to get pinned. And there's a particular reason that they name this eliminator matches. It's their way of saying it's a number one contender match.
Yes, but I hope they don't do it like very regularly, like how WWE does, and we give WWE stick for that. So yeah.
This is one of the matches for Road Rage. I'm not that excited, but it's going to be even better that we have. If it sounds better in front of a limited audience here in Daily's Place, then it's going to be even better in front of a packed crowd.
And the stakes are involved as well with the championship on the line. So a lot of interesting scenarios we could get to.
I don't think that the Bucks are losing. I think they should lose the title to a legit
Neither.
tag team.
Yes.
So, and by the way, this should be the end of Kingston getting involved in the tag team scene and getting involved with the Bucks. And if he does want to continue his feud, then he could go after Kenny Omega, which I'm been predicting for a couple of weeks now.
Yes, but seems like they're going for another direction with Kenny Omega, which we'll get to later.
So that's that. But let's move on, man. We had Jungle Boy versus Jack Evans. But before that, there was a little promo or backstage segment with Jungle Boy and Christian Cage, where you could see Jungle Boy getting ready for the match. But here comes Christian Cage, being the veteran, giving him some pep talk. Jungle Boy is happy to take this, listen to Christian and his advice. So here comes Luchasaurus and Marco Stunt. So Luchasaurus says that he was glad that Christian came to the aid of Jungle Boy last week. So there was talking some nonsense regarding dinosaur and prehistoric ages. So that was that. But let's talk about Jungle Boy versus Jack Evans match first. So the story here was that Jungle Boy, if he wins, he's the only wrestler in AEW to reach the 50th win, you could say, record. So that was the story. But there was also the story of Matt Hardy. So Jack Evans is part of the Hardy faction. So Hardy wants Jack Evans to at least win loss record doesn't matter, but he wants Jungle Boy to get hurt, etc., etc. So this match was, you could say, very fun to watch. Jack Evans is talented, Jungle Boy is great. So what do you think about the match here between Jungle Boy and Jack Evans?
Oh, it was a fun match, and the entire story was basically around Jungle Boy getting his 50th win in AEW. So that was like interesting, and the way they got to that, like they were teasing like submission wrestling, high flying wrestling, and Jack Evans is mad underrated. Like that's a wrestler I feel who should be doing more, and probably going after the tag titles, but they aren't really credible of that sort right now. And like I was caught by surprise, like I didn't really know that they were in the Hardy faction, because I know about Butcher and the Blade and Private Party being a part of it, but I wasn't really aware. Like they've been on and off in that case with the Hardy, and of course, like Matt Hardy's gimmick is basically being a carny who's just concerned about the money, doesn't really care what happens the other way. But yeah, this match was great, and like special shout out for Jungle Boy, because like literally throughout the show, every single person on the show was putting him over in any way after his showings last week with Kenny Omega, which was, I mean, it was a great match. Even though like it was a foregone conclusion, but like the way they did the match was, you literally forgot for a while that Jungle Boy, like it was like Kenny was going to win eventually, but like it was a foregone conclusion, like I said, and like Jungle Boy's performance and the crowd's reaction made you forget that for a while, which is really great in a wrestling scene. But like he's been on a hot streak lately, Jungle Boy, like both inside and outside the ring, and like Jericho, who was on commentary at this time, like he was giving ideas about like how once he had long hair and how it is advantageous to the ring. I was like, what is he on right now, but it was entertaining in its own right. And Jungle Boy wins the match with a snare trap, which is his, you could say, has become his permanent finishing move, which is good. Like he's adding different moves to his arsenal, and they're slowly building him up again for later down the line. And he's someone who they see a lot of future in, and along with a lot of guys like which we'll get to. And yeah, I mean, he is one of the biggest rising stars with someone who has like a good enough theme song for the crowd to get along with, and the crowd loves him. Like he's really great, and he's only 24, so obviously, like like he'll be improving tremendously later down the line. So a lot of positives with Jungle Boy as a wrestler and like as a future star in the company.
So, like you said, Jungle Boy wins with this near trap. He gets to the 50th win record here in AEW, being the first guy. So, post match, we
Yes.
see HFO I'm saying Jeff Hardy, Matt Hardy, and Private Party. So they're planning to attack Jungle Boy here, but here comes the baby faces, Jurassic Express and Christian Cage. So they attack the heels. Christian is attacking Matt Hardy, who's looking for once again trying to hit the kill switch again, I think, but Matt Hardy was able to escape. So that's one story they have. They are trying to build the singles match between Christian Cage and Matt Hardy, which is going to happen in one of the specials, I think, in July. But the other thing is the main thing that is happening. It feels like they are going to, have Christian turn heel after these stories are done.
Yeah, they did tease it a little last week before the title match, when Christian was like, you shouldn't be grateful, you should like look to earn the championship and all that jazz. But I'm not excited for Christian and Matt Hardy at all, man. It's 2021. Maybe like Christian's a great worker. He'll make it work, obviously, but I can't really say. Like I'm not excited for the match at all. And if they even do like a tag scene where Christian teams with the Jurassic Express versus Hardy and any team that he chooses, so yeah, I mean, like I'm not excited about Christian versus Matt Hardy, but in other ways, like there are different people who are going to emerge as bigger stars out of this feud, which is obviously there's Jungle Boy and Private Party as well. So let's see what happens in this case.
I don't mind a singles match because it's just, you could say, underneath feud in this whole shows. You could say it's not a main event or in the level of a main event feud. It's just there. They can sell this match just with the nostalgia and have a a decent enough match. I think Christian can pull out a great match in Matt Hardy.
Yes, and like you mentioned, it's if they do it on any of these specials, it'll be great in that case, but not on a big pay-per-view, I feel.
But let's talk about. I think this is, you could say, one of the highlights on the entire show. So we had Tony Schiavone. He was interviewing the men of the year, especially Ethan Page, because he was talking about this coffin match that was about to happen at Road Rager against Darby Allin. I'm saying. So first off, Page is really good on the mic, man. He's good on the mic, and I could say after MJF, he is the best heel here in AEW.
Yes, you could say that, like people genuinely dislike him in more ways than one. So he's great, Ethan Page, and like the main purpose of having this team of Page and Sky is basically helping each other out, especially Sky, who's been floundering since he left SAU. But Page is completely outshining him, man. Like he's a star on his own, and Sky isn't, like, it's not doing any favors for Scorpio Sky, which is very sad. Like he's talented, but he's a bit off on the mic. But Page is really taking the mantle over here. And even in this case, like they're building towards Page and Darby, who is what do you say? Like they are actually addressing their feud in Evolve, which is interesting. Like I wasn't sure what happened. Like I wasn't really following it, but I'm excited. I was excited for this match to happen next week, and like here we are. So like it might happen a week or two, a week after that. I think Fighter Fest, I believe.
Yeah. So let's talk about what happened. So Paige is, it's really talking shit here, talking shit to the crowd, talking shit to Darby Allin. She was repeating again why he wants this match. Says he wants to cripple Darby Allin, and he also mentions the history between these two, dating back from their independent scene. And you could say he also said that he has certain jealousy towards Darby Allin. So we see Sting showing up. Sting's music hits. Sting comes out. He's dragging a coffin with wheels, and it's covered with a white cloth. Then we see, your typical Darby Allin special video package where we see Darby Allin, burning a frame, a casket like frame into and just burning it. So back to the, live shot. So Darby Allin comes out of this said coffin and attacks both Sky and Page. So Darby Allin goes after Page while, Scorpio Sky eats a, Scorpion death drop from Sting. So Darby Allin is actually trying to, gouge the eyes of, Ethan Page as, officials come out to, separate these two. So Page was able to escape. So Page gets on the mic and says that, talks about this coffin match and says that this match is now cancelled. And if he wants this match, and said they could possibly do it at Fighter Fest or something like that. But
He
in order
mentioned
to
Fighter
have this,
Fest.
yeah, in order to have this match, that Darby Allin has to, do something like, right, give him something in return that they don't touch either in a week or something like that. That's a kind of stipulation they are throwing around. So I thought this segment was really good, and it's especially highlighted Ethan Page, and we already talked about the heel stuff and the mic work. So yeah, that's that.
Yes, he's clearly the star of the two, hands down. And like it's not doing Scorpio Sky any favors. Like Ethan Page has become the highlight of the act, which is great. And what happens between Page and Darby, I feel it's going to be Page who will win the match, because Darby is reported to be part of a TV show, Jackass 4. Yeah.
Mm,
Like, is it a movie or a TV show? I mean, shit, I don't exactly
I'm
know,
just
but
hearing that from. Is that true?
yeah, Sean Ross Sapp reported it that Darby will be part of that. So if he's off to shoot that, then obviously it's Ethan Page winning, and it kind of made sense. Like Darby is kind of the Undertaker-esque, like dead man guy who just gets killed at a very regular occasion and then comes back. So if, for example, like if he loses, he's in his coffin, and you have the chance to build Ethan Page from there for the singles titles. So I really see him doing well as a TNT champion, Ethan Page.
But let's talk about this promo from MJF. It was a kind of random thing that we saw because he started talking mainly about Chris Jericho. It says he brings up the fact that Jericho wants another match against MJF, but MJF, openly said that he's denying it. He talks about Jericho for a while, that said Jericho used to be a legend, and all these praises for Jericho, but he talks about how Jericho has now is just a shadow of his former self, something like that. So he throws out a kind of stipulation that I think it's for next week, that will be happening for Road Rager. So it's a face off between MJF and Chris Jericho, and MJF he will decide the stipulation for this, to end this whole charade or feud, you could say, with Jericho and this whole bullshit with the faction warfare. So he talks about the Jericho stuff, and then he gets to Sammy Guevara. He will beat Sammy Guevara and make a statement from that. That's all. Really good promo from MJF, and I'm really intrigued what this stipulation will be, because most of them are predicting that it could be one of the easy choices are that MJF versus Jericho happens, but Jericho has to put his career on the line, something like that.
I personally feel that it's like, yeah, if there's going to be an MJF Jericho singles match where the losers faction gets disbanded, I was thinking more in the tag sense, like it's a group versus group match, but obviously like the ring wouldn't contain all of them together. But yeah, I feel that's the direction that they're going for, mostly related to Jericho's career. And if, for example, if Jericho wins and wins back his career, I'm not sure where will that leave MJF, because like, as someone who has previously faced for a world championship, his momentum has stagnated a little since joining the Inner Circle and then joining the Pinnacle, sorry, forming the Pinnacle. And I thought, like, at this point, from that from the world title match, you could say like they would build him up later down the line. That's what I felt when they formed the Pinnacle earlier. But I mean, it's going to be fine. Like MJF versus Jericho, it's like just to end the feud altogether. Like I feel this feud has run its course by itself, because I think it's been way too long. It's been a year that since this entire story started of MJF joining, and then now to where we are right now. So yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see what stipulation MJF brings out next week, and it's one of the ways to plug you in for their show next week, and especially MJF, who is being featured with Chris Jericho, and he's a legend in the business. Like, one interesting thing I see is Jericho, who's been wrestling for 30 years, and MJF, who is 25 years old. So it's like a good disparity of age 10 years between both of these guys.
But the career on the lines kind of stipulation is the logical thing they could do.
Yes, but I'm just like, if they end up using that stipulation, and I'm not sure where will it go, and it kind of builds the excuse me, it kind of builds the excitement in a way, because you don't know what's going to happen. It can go either ways, and that's what wrestling really works, when in the probability, when there is like a huge probability of both things happening.
Let's see, man. I hope this time around they end this feud in a nice way. It's like they are making mistakes after mistakes after mistakes in this whole Inner Circle Pinnacle thing.
Yeah, and I personally felt that they were going to disband the Inner Circle at Stadium Stampede to establish Pinnacle as a solid faction. But like, having Inner Circle win that and prolonging this feud, I don't think it has done any favors.
Or they should have ended the feud entirely at Stadium Stampede.
Yes, yeah, and like, they are still referring to the Blood and Guts ending that happened when Jericho fell and MJF established himself as like a top heel. So that's where this story is coming from, like this particular match. So let's see what happens. Like, next week is going to be interesting.
On that topic, now that you mentioned it, shall we talk about the thing that is going on with Jericho recently? So I think he was in an interview and he talked about that particular spot from that blood and guts falling off the cage thing. And he also, I think, he was brought up the thing that certain ladies from the other side kind of poked at him. So these particular two ladies are Shayna Baszler. He didn't throw names and all. No, neither of the interviewer or Jericho mentioned names here. But what happened was the actual two are Shotzi Blackheart and Shayna Baszler. The thing with Shayna Baszler is that she actually, sounded a little educated, gave her, honest opinion on this whole thing that happened with Jericho. And while on the other side, Shotzi Blackheart, she was, being a little childish, throwing gifts and, poking fun at Jericho. So Jericho discussed this particular situation, said that if these certain ladies, when they lose their job, then they will come here to AW and beg for, a job. He said something like that. So I wanted to get your first comments on this whole thing that is going on. So was Jericho sounding a little bitter, or the two ladies came off a little harsh?
I mean, a friendly banter works, between both companies. But if you're like, I'm way past the point of tribalism where it's like they're deriding the other product just to feed your own agenda. And to your point, I feel yes, Jericho was a little bit bitter about this, and like he was completely rattled because Shotzi and Shayna, they're just doing for the sake of fun and banter. And in a way, it's also like taking shots at uh, taking shots at the competition, and I'm completely past that. And because even AEW does it on a very regular basis, which took me out of the product in the first place. Like, I wasn't really excited at the start when they formed. So but now, like, I've gotten used to it, and I've learned how to put that out of my enjoyment. So in a way, that's working for me. But regardless, yes, to your point, Jericho was better. And it's like the when you make fun of someone like make fun of a sensitive person, and he can't take jokes on yourself. That's it.
But yeah, man, like I said, Shayna Baszler actually sounded like an educated person. She gave her honest and, she sounded a little professional here. But Shotzi Blackheart, man, with all
She
due
has
res-
been taking shots.
yeah, with all
Yeah,
due
she has been
respect,
taking
with all due respect, she needs to shut the fuck up.
totally.
Like, yeah, and that, getting fired and going, begging for a job, that is a shoot, you could say.
Yeah, that was a little excessive from Jericho, like which show proves the point that he was completely rattled.
Yeah, nothing much to add on this situation. You said your points. I am said some of the points. Not really a big deal, but yeah, Jericho. Yeah, he little did went a little overboard with this whole thing.
Yeah,
But
he has been.
let's get back to the show, man. So we heard from Andrade El Idolo. So he was cutting his a promo, and he was actually being interviewed by Alex Abrahantes. So we you say something?
No, 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 no.
Yeah. So what happened was he was cutting a promo, and they actually showed captions for this guy, which kind of helps in this situation. Even though I think it really works for Andrade if he gets caption, because there would be no some of the majority of the audience that would complain that, oh, we don't understand when this guy speaks English, etc., etc. But we had the caption deal. So the topic here was that he was addressing the thing that happened last week, where he said he was going to make this announcement, but he was getting interrupted by Matt Seidel, which he was referring as Matt something.
Matt
So
something.
so he was going on and on, and he pitched this idea of him versus Matt something next week in his debut match. So this is official. This is set for Road Rager next week. It's going to be a fun match, and Matt Saddle is a great opponent.
Yes, and both of them have somewhat similar wrestling styles, which is going to work. And this match, I mean, even on paper and hopefully on execution, is going to rule 100%. And shout out to Alex Abrahantes. Like, I was getting to that. Like, he's one of my favorite people on the show. Like, while he's whenever he's doing these backstage bits on YouTube and Instagram, at the same time when he is managing Penta with the whole Penta says shtick. But yeah, with Andrade, like his debut, to be very honest, has been a little flat. Obviously, like the way he entered the, I mean, when he entered the way he entered the arena on his first appearance to now. So it's been a little topsy turvy and it's been tricky, but a great match is going to solve that, I feel, because knowing the level of talent that Andrade is, and this is like his best shot now, and no better opponent to start off with is with Matt Seidel, and I'm excited for this match like completely. So it's going to be one of the matches of the night for me, and but I feel that I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah, it's going to be an really good match. These two are great, but I'm really intrigued on what this surprise is. I already talked about
Yes.
two possibilities, obvious possibilities. One is Tia Trinidad, being the manager, which is better than being paired with Vicky Guerrero, I believe. And the other is my boy Tony Khan opens the forbidden door and calls Tetsuya Naito and his whole boys from New Japan.
Yeah. Nah, Naito is like a more of a far-fetched possibility. Maybe just getting like, if I don't think they're working with Ring of Honor, are they?
Basically, I'm saying that there is a kind of Los Ingobernables, version here in AEW as well.
Yes, but like with Forbidden Door thing, like I don't think they're working with Ring of Honor, right?
Nope.
Uh-huh. Because if that was the case, then you could have just had, or maybe like if their contracts expire, have Roosh and Dragon Lee join AEW and form the faction. But I feel that will be too obvious, and they just want AEW kind of wants to differentiate from what got them over elsewhere. Like even with what do you say, having Thea Trinidad in the corner of Andrade, which will be a bit of conflict of interest, maybe you could say, because they just introduced Andrade on TV, and they paired him up with Vicky Guerrero, and like it's just the start. So maybe like if they want to pair Andrade up with someone else, they'll wait for like maybe 2 months and then see if it clicks or not. Because this, in a way, like Andrade with Vicky is also a bit of an experiment.
That seem, man, at least they have somewhat of a hype going around with regards to Andrade El Idolo.
El Idolo.
But let's get to another in-ring interview. This was with Shivani. He was interviewing Kenny Omega, the AEW World Champion, and I have to say, man, this is the best he could say Kenny Omega sounded on the mic.
Yes, I feel that he's perfectly fine on the mic. Like there are obviously detractors that he can't do this, he can't do that, but I feel he's been great on the mic like for a long time, like especially from his New Japan days. And there was a great line by Tony Schiavone while Kenny was entering, like with he was having this Lemmy mustache, and Tony, no, I think it was Jericho. He's like, did he borrow the Young Bucks' razor?
Razor. Great line, man.
Great line with that. But yeah, like as a champion, I feel apart from the other moment, like he really looks great as this final boss version for now. And this is the best that he's looked as a champion, minus the shitty mustache.
And yeah, I would agree that Kenny Omega is really good on the mic. Problem is he was cutting different type of promos, because in New Japan you usually do a promo like if it's a interview, So he but in regards to AEW, this is the best he has sounded, because I was wondering where is Don Callis. I need Don Callis, but he really stood his ground, and he was able to make this segment work, and he sounded confident and he sounded like a champion, I would say.
Yes, he has become the final boss of AEW for now. Even though, like, you don't really see him as one, but obviously, like, he is the world champion, so he has to be. And like, he also did a very good job of putting the talent over, like whoever he's beaten, like Moxley, Phoenix, Park, Orange Cassidy, and even Jungle Boy. So he's like referred to them individually as like the toughest man, the best high flyer, the best rising star, the best athlete, and the best for Orange. I think he said like the best charismatic act, the most charismatic act. So that was a great way of putting them over as well, but also show how much of a dick Kenny Omega is as a heel champion.
And he's finally hit now. I mentioned it last week. He's finally hitting his stride as AEW World Champion.
Yes, I feel like he's been doing great since after Revolution. Like he's gotten, like, he keeps changing his ranges. Either he's like funny, or he's like overly serious, or this boasty, jackass who has like all the championships in the world. So you are seeing a range of what he can do as a champion and as a character by himself. But I feel that this segment really establishes the type of character Kenny Omega is, and in a very good way in that.
The same man. I think his reign has been neutral for the last, you could say, months, and now it's going up, up, up. As we know, we get to things are getting back to normal, and we are getting back to live crowds and different venues. But let's quickly talk about this segment. So Omega was there. It was like you say, putting over his the opponents he has taken down, like for example Phoenix, Mox, Jungle Boy, etc., etc. But he said that there is actually no one left to dethrone him as champion. So he says that he will be happy defending other belts and winning other belts from other promotions. But here comes the Dark Order, the entire Dark Order stable led by Evil Uno. So these guys get a great reaction from the crowd. So Evil Uno was actually saying that was saying something. I don't know what actually what the actual line was, but so he was saying that there is a particular guy that that is ready to take the title of you. And even Omega was he was making sure that he doesn't mention this guy by name, but he knew who he was talking about. So yeah, so they kind of gave you that this Page versus Omega program is going to start anytime now. We have been talking about this for weeks, and now it's time. Now this is peak, we could say, program for the AW World Championship. With if Page and gets involved in the World Title program.
Yes, and I think they even teased that like a couple weeks ago when they announced Kenny and Jungle Boy, and they had an interview with Hangman where they asked, like, whoever wins, it's going to be good for you because you're the number one ranked wrestler now. So that was great. And even like the story makes sense for Hangman in a lot of ways, because the first All Out was where he lost the first world championship match to Chris Jericho, and the second All Out was where he lost the tag titles with Kenny Omega to FTR. So in a way, this is like a good redemption story for him. And I think I've said this a lot of times on Twitter, and whoever follows me, like, they know that I am I am in love with the way they've told the story with Hangman, like someone who was part of the elite, and they saw a lot of future in him, and from there, have his first loss for the AEW championship when he wasn't ready. So since then, he's been on a downward spiral in life, with depression and anxiety, and him resorting to drinking and drinking to deal with this situation that he's in mentally. And they've told the story like very subtly, which is great, because like subtlety in wrestling when done right is absolutely amazing. And since then, like having being paired with Kenny Omega, like he wanted to leave the elite at first because he thought he doesn't, and to this day, he doesn't really think very highly of himself because of the said state mentally he is in. And he wanted to leave the elite at first, and from there, like the Bucks told him no. And from there, like he won the tag titles with Kenny, and that Kenny was the only person who was holding this tension together with for Hangman and the Bucks, until the Bucks lost their contendership to FTR. And from there, like the Kenny and Hangman losing the titles, and then Kenny turning on him. So they've done like a great story arc for Hangman, and this is the best chances any to have this redemption story. And like I mentioned, like they had Hangman didn't really have friends, and like he was resorting to drinking, and then Dark Order came in and tried to be his friends. And you remember when Dark Order proposed to Hangman to join them, and Hangman said no because of his fear. So from there, like since the first All Out to now, like it's been 2 years, and they've been telling the story with Hangman. And now is a greater time as any to have this payoff of Hangman winning the world championship. And I hope, and I kind of feel that that's the direction they're heading towards. And like I said, like I'm very much excited for this match. And Hangman is easily like the biggest baby face they have in AEW
Jungle Boy.
after Moxley. No, after Moxley, I was going to say, but Jungle Boy is
He's
getting
getting
there,
there.
like slowly. Yeah, slowly and steadily, and he's going to become a star. Like maybe 2 years down the line, he'll be in the same position as Hangman. But yeah, like this is the best chance to have this feud. And of course, like I mentioned, All Out, it also ties in with Kenny and Hangman breaking up at All Out last year to now them facing each other. So like a lot of interweaved what do you say wrinkles in the story that ties all the way to the first All Out that they did. So I would say that I am very much excited for this. So
But the thing is, the thing to look forward is whether Page gets the title in the first go or they stretch it out. Because there is the other factor with Omega and his injuries that he's got, and if this injuries leads to him vacating the dropping the title very soon, and that too Page in his first go. But I wouldn't mind if they stretch it out, because there would be
me
even
neither.
more investment in this whole story.
Yes, maybe like they'll just try to test the waters with Hangman as someone who has this anxiety again. So what if he blows it again, and if he does, how will he bounce back from that? So a lot of interesting possibilities in this story. And yeah, I'm excited. And especially like you mentioned that Kenny has these multiple injuries, and they've already, I think Melzer already mentioned that Kenny is close to dropping the Impact World Championship to Sami Callihan at their next pay-per-view. So with that, maybe you could see that happening even in AEW, and slowly and steadily you could, I don't know, this is just wishful thinking, but maybe you could start a Kenny Omega face arc from there as someone who had like all the world in his fingertips, and now like he's lost them all at once. So how will he bounce back from that? So yeah, I mean, I'm thoroughly invested in this story for both Hangman and Omega and whatever they do from here. So count me in as an excited wrestling fan.
Let's see, man. But let's talk about the TNT Championship match. This was Miro versus Brian Pillman Jr. Uh, so match was, you could say, fine. Because Miro, looked like your typical monster, which they have been doing a great job. AW really making him as a threat now. Brian Pillman Jr. I said this multiple times in the AW reviews that it's kind of a Brian Pillman, so they are kind of experimenting with him, ever since that documentary came out about his father, and it's really kind of getting over with the crowd as well. So you could say this was an actual experiment. And by the way, I have to say that Brian Pillman Jr. works very old school.
Very much so. Like it really, they're trying to like he's trying to mirror his dad in a way. So which is great to see. And Pillman, like senior as a wrestler by himself, was very exciting, especially at a time where like you didn't really see such high flying stuff in WCW. Like they had these rules where if you're over the top rope, or if you have these turnbuckle moves, how do I say, like high flying moves, you get disqualified. So that was like a very old school rule that they were following under Bill Watts, and in a way with Jim Herd. Like I'm talking about early 90s. But now, I mean, that time Pillman was like a star attraction as like this young up and comer exciting cruiserweight. And Pillman Junior is also mirroring the same style, but now like we are condensed and desensitized to high flying wrestling now, and it's like one of the selling points at a wrestling show wherever you go. Like you have these different varieties, and that way Pillman Jr. fits that bill as a high flyer, but in a very old school way, like to harkening back to his dad, which is great to see. And this match with Miro was more of a showcase for Brian Pillman than it was for Miro in a way. Like it was a decent match, but this was like it was establishing Miro as a champion, and with the new character that he's been adapting as a someone with a god complex. Like he's God's favorite champion, and they even changed his theme song and his nickname from Best Man to the Redeemer.
Hmm. I liked his whole theme, by the way.
Yeah, I liked his old theme. This new theme will take me a while to get used to, but the old theme slapped. Like the best
It,
man, the best, and then the music hits, which
it,
was
it's
great.
like it's like every wrestler these days is getting like a god-like theme song.
Yes, you could say that in a way, but yeah.
But about this match, the match was fine. So Miro actually got the win from locking in the game over, and he's now really doing this transition now where he actually bends his opponents and locks in a, you could say, sleeper like hold. So that's that. Miro gets the win here, and have the teased
I feel
anything for. Have the teased something as a next challenger for Miro?
not yet. They haven't really done that. But for Miro, I feel like they're going to change the name of the game over as well. It will be something godlike, which will fit his character.
Yeah, you could say Miro is finally, getting to his potential. Like the first run in AEW with Kip Sabian was underwhelming, you could say. But now, when he broke up, then you could say the real Miro that we all wanted.
Yes, and obviously, like he keeps referring to his wife as well during every segment. He's like, "I thank God for making me the strong person, and I also thank God for giving me a hot wife." Like this is the best dickheadery you could see from Miro as a champion. Like as a wrestler actually, but the TNT title comes as an added bonus to his character. And who do you really see challenging Miro from here? Like he's been dominating the show throughout in
The,
that division.
you get a lot, you get TNT title matches every week at this point. But if you want me, who can take the title of him, maybe a Jungle Boy.
Yes, I mean with the rise that he's been having, that's like the most logical step. But obviously they'll take a lot of time with that. Like maybe build it up to the next pay per view or something. Like it'll need, like if you're trying to like make him face a bigger star, then obviously like you need that build during the feud. But in that meantime, he's like sweeping the floor with other challengers who are way low down in the card. Like before, I think like this was a week before Double or Nothing, and he was supposed to face Lance Archer for the championship. And in like a big fuck you to Lance Archer, he was facing Dante Martin from what's his
Top
tag
flight.
team's name? Top Flight. I keep getting confused between Top Flight and the Acclaimed, like mostly in nomenclature. But like yeah, that was like a good heel move from Miro's part. Like he was just giving a middle finger to Lance Archer. And speaking of Lance Archer, man, like the constant losses has really hurt his character, I feel.
Now they are, trying to rebuild him. That's it.
Yes, and he's kind of become like their Big Show. Like you don't know if he's a heel or a face depending on the situation.
The only, a good thing they could do is they could showcase him a lot, but they can do that if they move him to Rampage.
Yes, like how did they mention what type of show Rampage is going to be like?
It's going to be, imagine it's just the early days of SmackDown.
Yes, or like the Thunder to WCW's Nitro.
Similar.
Yes, and they have like another show to build their stories on in a way.
Yeah, the talents that don't get time on Dynamite will get the time on Rampage. Simple.
Yes, pretty much.
But let's move on, man. So we had, but before we get to this match, we had Team Taz. So Taz was cutting a promo. He was addressing this situation that is going on with Brian Cage and Ricky Starks. So he has decided that Brian Cage on July 14th of on a edition of Dynamite, Brian Cage would finally defend his FTW championship against Ricky Starks. So this is a way, to, you could say, settle this whole grudge that these two men have. So there you go. That's the story they are continuing with. I think Brian Cage gets screwed here in a way.
Yes, I don't know, man. It's kind of weird for me because Team Taz is literally my favorite stable in AEW. So, and I feel that Ricky Starks is going to be a major star in AEW from like maybe 2 or 3 years down the line, and they clearly have big plans for him. And especially now, they've been teasing this Brian Cage babyface turn since Revolution. I mean, after Revolution, when he showed his respect to Sting, and every single week, like they just try to bury the hatchet backstage. And whenever like Taz is on commentary, he's like, yeah, everything is water under the bridge, this is fine. And then there is Brian Cage being a babyface and screwing over Team Taz. So this is like the way, like how Taz addressed it. Like you need like a big family. Like the point he was saying was basically like family beats harder. Like within the family, a family fight is much harder to see in a way. So he was getting to that. And like Hook and Hobbs, even they were like kind of frustrated. Like I'm over it, man. Just solve this feud right now. So like it's going to happen eventually, that like you said, that Cage will eventually get screwed, and they'll move ahead with Starks as the focal point of Team Taz. I'll be very much in for that because I feel like Starks is one of my favorite wrestlers, and he's going to be a major player, as he's going to be a future AEW champion for me.
There you
But
go.
apart, I just want to mention that if they remove Brian Cage, like they had been teasing this on Dark for like months. And as Taz, he's a commentator on AEW Dark, and he's been trying to recruit this female wrestler on Team Taz. Forgot her name. Layla Hirsch.
Easy.
Legit Layla Hirsch. Yeah, like they had been teasing that for a while. And I hope that happens. Like, in a way, you have someone from the faction fighting for the women's championship too. But obviously, you'll need a lot of build for that. So, like, if Cage is out, I feel that things are on the upside for Team Taz in terms of, you know, moving forward in story.
Layla Hirsch sounds cool in Team Taz.
Like, it fits the background as well. Like, she is a proper Greco-Roman wrestler, and Team Taz is all about creating legit wrestlers as well,
Hmm. Let
athletes, so to speak.
let's see. But let's talk about Vicky Guerrero and Nyla Rose. So they were facing Doctor Britt Baker, DMD, and Rebel. So, oh man, this was, you could say this was the low point of Dynamite this week for obvious reasons. It was going to be that way because the involvement of Vicky Guerrero wrestling was kind of was, you could say, what's the word I'm looking for?
Downer.
Something like that, but everything was going kind of fine, I guess. So let's talk about the things, the stuff that happened here. So what happened was Vicky Guerrero actually started the match where she was actually being shoved around by Reba, but Vicky tagged out, and here comes Nyla Rose. So for the majority of the match, Britt Baker actually tried to stay away from the match. So it was all, Rebel that was, getting kicked around, getting thrown around by Nyla Rose. But Britt Baker finally made a tag, and she was actually, taking down Nyla Rose. She's a really good sling blade. So there was a really good back and forth between these two women. Nyla Rose, hit that big knee drop that she does over that top rope, which
Kenta
looks,
style.
yeah, which looks scary every time she does that. So
Other
she went,
wrestler, that is.
yeah, so she went for the pin here. I'm talking about Nyla Rose. But here comes Rebel, and she breaks up the pin. And for some reason, she falls down and didn't decide to get up. And I knew something went wrong at that point because she was on the, she was on the camera. You could see her on the camera, but she wasn't moving around. She was just laying around in the edge of the ring. I think she was being checked around while, Britt Baker was doing all the wrestling stuff. So at the end, Baker won the match with the lockjaw
Lockjaw.
on Vicky Guerrero, and that was it. But let's talk about this Rebel stuff, man. I I don't know. The report is that she actually blew her knee, which is bad.
So poor Rebel. I wish her a speedy recovery. And this match was meh for me. Like, I wasn't interested in this feud at all. And I think they're building this match for Fighter Fest, I feel.
Night two.
Night 2, that Nyla Rose and Britt Baker are going to wrestle for the championship. But yeah, I mean, this match was, it was what it was. And poor Rebel, like, she was doing most of the work, and towards the end she blows her knee, which is very sad. And it's going to, I'm not sure how is she going to be a part of programming if she ended up suffering, if it's confirmed that she blew her knee out and she'll be out of action for a long time. Maybe, like, because she's also part of what, Britt Baker is as an act by herself. And she is constantly entertaining, with being a sidekick, someone who takes most of Britt's falls. And yeah, this match was fine. Like, I wasn't interested, but towards the end, like, if it was a way to help get Britt over as this champion. And the post match beatdown, man, the bump she took for the table was scary.
Yeah, after that Rebel spot, we didn't wanted to see Britt Baker getting thrown around in the table.
Yes, even Nyla Rose took a very nasty fall, like outside the ring, when she was trying to jump off the rope, and Vicky was just down there. So Britt pushes Vicky, which crotches Nyla, and then takes her out. and she took this really
Awkwardly.
scary, awkward fall on the apron, and then she went down on the floor, which was also scary.
This match was all over the place.
Yeah, this match was literally all over the place. And with the women's division, we are often scared, how thin AEW's women's division was. Like now they are kind of building it, and you don't really want your major players to get injured, especially at this time. So yeah, it was very scary to see them take those falls, and especially with Rebel also out of the picture with her knee injury. So wishing her a speedy recovery as well.
And this feud, man, this feud has been underwhelming. Like, we don't even have a clear indication who's the babyface, who's the heel. Like, Britt Baker was working as a heel, and then we see Nyla Rose doing heel stuff. Like, nothing is making sense here.
Yes, and because of Brit, Nyla is the de facto face, but that also isn't saying much because she's still being this monster that she often is. So that way, it's a little topsy turvy. Like you could say, the feud itself is all over the place, right? You don't really understand what's going on. But
B-
the match, I feel like Britt is going to win to establish her championship reign, and we'll move past from that.
Uh, let's see. And I said that Britt Baker is great as a heel. I don't know. I hope this babyface thing is temporary, and she could have be going back to her heel stuff. She could actually do some great things in that department.
Yes, but Nyla is kind of the face in this story.
That's the
In
that's
this story,
that's the whole confusing bit regarding this whole
exactly.
feud.
And yeah, like you mentioned, Britt is one of my favorite acts on AEW. I feel she's fantastic ever since she's turned heel and become this obnoxious dentist. So yeah, I mean, the story itself is quite but once we are past this match, then we'll see how are they going to build Brit from there. And speaking of Brit, where's Hikaru Shida now? Since losing the championship, like she's nowhere to be seen.
You could say that's the mentality of AEW. Give us one segment regarding the women's, which I am fine with, but that's the reason you are not seeing someone like Hikaru Shida being featured. You could see her in the coming weeks
Yes.
they could give her a singles match here and there, but
Yeah, she did debut a new look on Dark like a week after losing a championship, but a star like Shida should be featured more on Dynamite. Maybe in a way they are trying to space each of their appearances, but like even though the AEW women's division is getting better now, like slow and steady, especially now that they've hired Sonjay Dutt to be be they've hired Sanjay Dutt as a producer, and he's working exclusively with the women's now, which is great to see.
hey, by the way,
So
why the where is this Sanjay Dutt story coming from?
like a lot of sources have confirmed, especially like PW Insider and Fightful, they've confirmed the story. And WWE, I mean, obviously, like they didn't really address it, but like a lot of reports are there from like very reputed sources that he's already started working with AEW as a producer.
Hmm. I think he's pulling a recruit now. Like he just came off from WWE and he from out of nowhere has joined AEW.
Yeah, but like there were reports that he had left the company like 2 months ago, and now that it's in public knowledge, so it's like a lot of different stories that are coming out of it.
Let's see. I
Yeah.
think it's not a confirmed story, but I think we'll get some indication in the coming weeks.
Yes. Let's see
But
what happens.
shall we get to the main event, or I'm forgetting something?
Yes. Before we get to the main event, like there was the segment before the team task promo. So Hangman confronts the Dark Order backstage that why are you fighting my battles? Like I can do it on my own. And even then, then he's interrupted by Colt Cabana saying that, "Are you scared of failure? Then don't worry. Like, it's okay to fail." And then they were reminding how Hangman was with Dark Order during their tough times recently, with Brody's passing, and then Evil Uno losing to Miro, and then what do you say, John Silver and Alex. Was they calling him Alex Marvez? Alex Reynolds, right, from Dark Order. So
Yes.
like they were all like consoling him, saying that it's okay to fail, don't worry about it, and like we are there for you every single time. And this also adds to Hangman's arc, like someone who has depression and anxiety, losing everyone that he liked, and becoming this, like having found someone, but he's not sure of himself as how confident he is heading into facing someone like Kenny, who is like the god of pro wrestling right now. And he's like, he doesn't believe in himself, but others do, which is great to see. So it adds up to Hangman's character as well. So yeah, like I'm gushing about the story like throughout, right, for Hangman.
That's the thing, mate. They are really made this intriguing thing, and we haven't even started yet.
Yes. So yeah, this was like a great short promo for him, and obviously they're going to build on this later in the coming weeks. And obviously, like we have now it's July. We have like 2 months for All Out pay-per-view, so like a lot can happen in that 2 months time frame, and a lot of stories can be introduced and built upon like in this time, which is great.
There you go, man. But before we get to the main event, they actually showed a highlight of Orange Cassidy being attacked or laid out by one of the HFO members, that is a butcher. So
Blade.
yo, it's Blade. Who cares, man?
Yeah.
They basically are the same person. But was what the point I was getting around was that they kind of booked a mixed tag for next week. We have Orange Cassidy and Chris Statlander facing Ali and the Blade. So there you go. And by the way, you were saying why someone like Hikaru Shida is not being featured. The thing is, I think they are kind of cooling off Hikaru Shida. So because they are building up someone like Chris Statlander, because I think they want that her to be the one of the next challengers for Britt Baker. So that's the reason Hikaru Shida is now down the, you could say, ranking system. Now as Chris Statlander is getting to that number one spot.
Yes, she's ranked number 4 right now, I feel. And yeah, another match that they are booking for next week is it's a mixed tag, not mixed tag. It's a 6-man tag featuring your favorite two stables, Pinnacle and Inner Circle. So Jake Hager, Santana, and Ortiz from Inner Circle with Conan in their side is facing FTR and Wardlow with Tully Blanchard by their side. So this is going to be a great match. But like if I would remove Hager and Wardlow out of the equation, I'd be more interested for this match.
Anyways, about this match, I think Sean Spears is the one who takes the pin. Easy booking, right?
No, he's not there in the match. Hager, it's Wardlow and FTR
Oh,
versus.
it's so I forgot. I thought Sean Spears was so he was actually in the main event. So let's see who takes. I don't know, because it's part of the entire feud, right, with the Inner Circle and in Pinnacle. So you could add this match also in this whole series of singles or tag matches.
Yes. So
And
let's get to the main event, I guess. Yeah, you were
um,
saying something. Sorry, I
yeah,
interrupted you.
in this whole Pinnacle and Inner Circle thing, I said last week that Proud and Powerful versus FTR is the money feud.
Absolutely. Like it is a dream match if you've been following like wrestling for let's say since 2017, 2018. Like these two were at the height of their like not FTR, not so much because they were in their on WWE main roster already. So, like, if you've seen FTR do the things that they did in NXT as Revival and Proud and Powerful while they were as great as they were as LAX. So, it was a dream match by itself. But now that we are at this point where it's actually happening, it should be given like more build and having them wrestle by themselves as teams, of course. That will be much better than having Hager and Wardlow added to the equation, as what I said. Like, I'd be more excited if both of them weren't part of this match.
Let's see. Let's get to the main event, man. It is MJF versus Sammy Guevara. So they build it like a first time singles match between these two, and I I think it's safe to say that this was better than Omega versus Jungle Boy from last week.
I mean, to each their own. Yeah, I would personally rate that too, but the finish was a bit convoluted for my liking. Like, but we'll get to that eventually. So, Sammy Guevara, I want to point out, like, he's a baby face now, and I don't know why they're still calling him Spanish God. He's not Spanish, one, and like when he was called the Spanish God was like a way to add to his heel douchebag character. Because he didn't know a single ounce of Spanish, and like they were calling him Spanish God. But now, like, he's a baby face and they're still calling him Spanish God is a little weird for me.
But about this feud, man, this feud, they are mostly built it on social media, and it was kind of you could say it went to the cringe and little over the top. You could say zone.
Yes, while they were posting each other's baby pictures, right?
Hmm. Uh,
But
and
yeah,
even with the whole promo thing that I think they showed it on the Road to series. Guevara really didn't came off as a baby face. He came off like a crybaby. MJF, he sounds organic, but Guevara didn't sound good.
yes,
That's the
MJF
only thing I
blew
could
him.
say.
MJF completely blew him out of the water, which is not a good sign for Sammy as a babyface, let alone as a wrestler.
At least this match saved this whole thing. Match was really great, and MJF I was really not out trying to out wrestle Guevara here, and there was actually having your typical fight forever like match here. MJF was coming up with some great spots, and he was actually chain wrestling from the start, but a little cheap shot, a poke to the eye from MJF, and then MJF was really working like a perfect heel or true heel, doing typical heel shit here. So there was one spot in this match. You could let's talk about the spots here. So what happened was MJ was sent to the outside into the crowd area. So Sammy Guevara, he did a he pulled off a basically RVD from ECW. He jumped from the crowd, sorry, from the top rope and went through the crowd, landed on the crowd, which was amazing, the fact that he actually pulled it off.
Yes, that was an insane spot from Sammy.
So there was yet another big spot where MJF actually hit a tombstone from the second rope, and you could say this was they could have done it as a finish. This should have ended the match, but Guevara kicked out. But I think the thing that saved this match to go a little overboard is that MJ was really doing a great job, selling the knee from that tombstone, and was doing really fantastic job selling that knee, and was not able to even get up at this point. But
Yes,
yeah,
yeah,
go on.
continue. No, continue.
So this was, you could say, the main. I could say we're getting to the climax here. So crowd are going insane for this match. So here comes, the Pinnacle members. We see Shawn Spears coming out. So Jericho saw this and is actually going for Spears, but he was blindsided by Wardlow. And Wardlow actually, takes Jericho and he throws him from that elevated, stage area, you could say, or the set. And Jericho landed awkwardly there. I think Jericho would have maybe, you could put him in that rebel, situation. I think he I think he got hurt or something. But when this was all going on, Sean Spears made it to the ringside. He took a chair and swings it on the head of Sammy Guevara. Sammy Guevara is knocked out. So MJF, crawls and was able to pin Guevara, and that was it. MJF beats Sammy Guevara, which was the right decision because it makes the faction look strong, and of course it makes MJF look strong, as he's is kind of undefeated still in AEW. So there you go. So thoughts on this whole thing we saw in the main event?
I mean, it was a great match, of course, and the entire story of this match, apart from this inner circle and pinnacle feud, was basically these two guys are going to carry this company in the near future, and these are like the biggest rising stars we have. So it was a showcase for both MJF and Sammy as wrestlers, and you've like people have given MJF shit, a lot of shit in the past of how meh of a wrestler he is. Like he makes up for that with his character work, which is obviously it's outstanding. But this match really showed how good of a wrestler MJF can be, and he's also someone who's constantly improving, and he's only going to get better with each passing moment. And obviously, like this story also said that like they were trying to show like how well-rounded Sammy is as a wrestler, and he was doing these crazy spots, like he was going like he was like doing these Canadian destroyers or Cuban destroyers, if you will, and how he jumped over the barricade on JF like from the top rope. So the reach that he got was amazing, man. Like he is a very good talent, Sammy Guevara, and obviously they'll look to build him up later down the line, starting with I feel he should be in line for TNT championship once this feud blows over. And like you mentioned, the tombstone, MJF's selling of the knee really made that spot work, even if Sammy Guevara kicked out of that. I feel the Undertaker will come back from retirement, and he'll beat the shit out of both of these guys. And you know how Undertaker's been complaining, right? Video game era is bullshit. So he'll get mad about that, I guess. Jokes aside, there was this interesting line by Tony Schiavone on commentary. He's like, normally he'll try to overstate his injury like the rat that he is, but folks, that feels like he's actually hurt. What was he trying to imply? God knows. And there was this really great spot of the Sammy Guevara hitting the go to hell, the GTH, and like he was trying to hook MJF's leg, and it goes onto the rope. So he blows that his greatest chance of uh, winning this match, and then which leads to the Pinnacle interfering in this match. So obviously we had that Jericho and Wardlow spot, and then Sean Spears hits Guevara with the chair. And the expression that Sean Spears does, I mean, what the fuck was he trying to do over there? Like, it gave a lot of suggestive meanings to that. The people have been like, I've been going online after I went online after this match, and like people have literally been calling him chair pervert, like in reference to Jay White. He was called a knife pervert by Chuck Taylor and Trent. So he's been called chair pervert as a result. So I mean, the expression that he did, like, it made me laugh my ass off, and to otherwise, which was a great match. And then MJF picks up the victory after Sean Spears hits him with a chair. So it was a great match, of course, and like it was, like I mentioned, it was a showcase for both of these wrestlers. Like, these guys are the future stars of AEW on wrestling altogether. So yeah, I mean, this was like a best way you could have gotten MJF over. And you mentioned like it helps establish Pinnacle as like a solid faction, and it also gives MJF mileage heading into his match with Chris Jericho, whatever that may be, with the stipulation that he introduces next week in the segment. But like, I'm glad that we are not getting town hall segments anymore between either one of MJF or Pinnacle. Like it got overboard to a point, like after Double or Nothing. Actually, even before Double or Nothing, when they sprayed the Pinnacle with the champagne, and then like each and every week they were doing these segments, like they had this press conference and Inner Circle, that is, and then like the go home show for Double or Nothing, Eric Bischoff comes out and celebrates their best moments if Inner Circle is breaking up. Like the segments have gotten a little like, over excessive for me, that I don't get excited for. But this next week, like it's going to be Jericho and MJF, so I think that should be fine with me. And it's leading up to something big, so should be okay.
So that was a Dynamite, man, the final Dairy's Place show for now. So then they did show that great package that we talked about the start of this review. And there's after this package was done, we are having a really great feel good moment as a viewer. And then Jim Ross had to mess that up, saying that it was saying that it was a WWE Dynamite. And there you go. He really misses that place, man. He really misses that place.
He's been shitting the bed constantly, like since for a long time. And if you've been watching New Japan on English commentary, you know, and especially even during the Mae Young Classic, like you knew how JR. I mean, it pains for me to say, and I really like JR in his prime, but it really pains for me to say that he's way past it, man. Like they should, like he should do these backstage interviews and come as a special attraction commentator, like how Taz has been doing, but without having his clique wrestlers coming in, his group, the faction that he represents, so to speak. And Jim Ross, like you could have him for the big matches, like these main event matches, or like how he was doing in WWE, while he was commentating for Triple H versus Undertaker, something like that. So you could have Jim Ross come as like a special attraction announcer, but regularly, man, like I can't really, get invested in his commentary anymore. Like they should, I feel they should hire, like either make Taz a permanent commentator or hire someone like Mauro or Tom Phillips to replace JR on commentary.
Mauro, I think Mauro is a confirm for Rampage. He has to be.
Yeah, he has to be, but Mark Henry is going to be a commentator for Rampage, right?
No. He's going to be as of now, he's just a backstage and since isn't that broadcasting team, you could say, but
Yeah, but
he's kind of a
given
backstage
that,
advisor. Let me get this straight. He's just a backstage advisor for now.
yes, but the way they've been hyping up, like especially when he arrived the first time at Double or Nothing, they've been like they've been alluding to the fact that he might be announcing for them. But yeah, Moro should be confirmed maybe, but like he even called the what
Omega
show was
Swan
that,
match.
man? Yes, at Rebellion, right? Rebellion was the pay-per-view. So he called the match there, which I felt was like a testing phase if he could be on either AEW or Impact. But they should get him for Rampage, or have him replace JR on Dynamite, like, or even Tom Phillips. I mean, even he's available, so you could have him as well. Like Tom Phillips would be a great addition to AEW, I feel.
JR's commentary, I would say JR is fine for now. I think they are selling.
Yeah.
It's his selling point is the nostalgia factor. That's it. And being around guys like Shivani and Excalibur helps.
Yes, there. I mean, yeah, like he's fine, JR, but I feel he's way past it. Like he is someone who feels like the lapsed fan more so than Tony Schiavone. That's weird in a way.
There you go, man. But I think that is the end for the review for now. But before we leave, man, where can these guys find you?
So you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at rid_aman. And if you're watching this review in video form, you can see it right above my head.
And you can find Slam Up Wrestling on Twitter at Slam Up Debut, Instagram at Slam Up Wrestling. And this was, sorry, you can find this review in audio versions like Anchor and Spotify as well. So this was the AEW Dynamite review, and see you guys next time.
See ya.